subscribe. This reaction, and I saw this late last night. His reaction is all you need to know.
Make sure they deny. What do you think they're going to run here?
Game first season opener ever in the history of this league.
And I want to know who she's talking to. Bree January is on the right side right here drinking. Who could she have been asking this question to?
We're both.
Let's set the scene. It's opening night. The biggest crowd in Indiana Fever history packs the building. National attention is locked in. The WNBA is riding the highest wave of mainstream interest it has ever seen, and the Indiana Fever, the team sitting at the center of all of it, has one job: don't blow it.
My sports supporters, well, we've got the continued fallout from the Indiana Fever loss to the Dallas Wings at home in the home opener to a team that won 10 games last year. The fallout is getting, the fandom getting loud. By fandom, I mean Caitlin Clark fandom. You had a lot of things coming out of that. You had the great mystery of back injury. Is it a back injury compensating for something else? Was it a hip flexor? Was it stressed enough? In my reaction video yesterday, is the second team, the second unit, the bench is not good. It's not. I said yesterday, I watched the Liberty play the other day. The game had gotten so far away, they had their second unit. Their second unit would beat the living shit out of our second unit. They'll run us out of the building if we're not careful.
They blew it. The Fever lost their home opener to the Dallas Wings. A Dallas Wings team, by the way, that finished last season with 10 wins. Not a typo. 10 wins. And this wasn't a heartbreaker. This wasn't a game decided in the final seconds that could be written off as a tough break. The Wings outplayed, out-executed, and outscored Indiana in a way that left the building quiet and the internet absolutely furious. Welcome to 2026. The Indiana Fever are already in crisis mode, and we're going to break down exactly how we got here.
I was having a conversation behind the scenes, and we were talking about automatic wins. The only automatic wins we could think of behind the scenes in a conversation between 3 or 4 of us was the sun and the fire as automatic wins against this team. Everybody else got a chance. To be real, here we go. So the Fever posted this, the final score. Holy hellfire. I mean, 1.6 thousand likes to nearly 400 comments. That is not the ratio that you are trying to see. Fire White, no size playing, CC off ball. She does what she does, not work. Then talks trash about Caitlin Clark fans. Look in the audience, what do you see? We haven't spent the last 6 decades watching the best basketball on earth. We know what it's supposed to look like. Yeah, I mean, if you grew up in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s of the NBA, you know what real good basketball is supposed to look like. Find a coach that can build around Clark, manage Mitchell, or trade her. Make this team something people wants to watch. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Messy. The wing shot.
Before we even get into X's and O's, let's talk about the comment section, because sometimes the most honest data doesn't come from box scores. It comes from social media. When the Fever posted the final score on their official account, the numbers were alarming. Roughly 1,500 to 1,600 likes. Nearly 4,000 comments. That ratio is not engagement. That ratio is a revolt. When a post generates more than double the comments compared to likes, it means people aren't celebrating, they're venting. They're complaining. They're questioning every decision that led to that moment. A healthy post has likes significantly outnumbering comments. What the Fever got instead was a digital petition demanding accountability. And the comments themselves, they weren't vague frustration. They were surgical, specific. basketball-literate criticism aimed directly at the coaching staff and front office. Fans calling out individual roster decisions. Fans pointing to defensive breakdowns. Fans asking the questions the local sports media has been slow to ask. This isn't a casual fan base lashing out after a bad game. This is a highly engaged, analytically minded audience that has been watching elite basketball for years at the college level, at the professional level, and knows exactly what it's looking at when a team isn't built right. So what went wrong? Let's be specific.
Their asses off, I'm not worried. Okay. And there they go again. Coach of the century. Oh, snap. Not the Joker. Not the Joker. You forgot the 80s leather jacket that continues to show up. That continues to show up like this is a bad 80s music video. Have to play more defense. They let the Wings get a lot of open shots. And then you have Dantis fouls within 10 minutes that kept Wings players going to the lines. Stephanie White asking anyone, what do you think they're going to run? Because she has not a clue.
Start with the defense. The entire offseason narrative around this Indiana Fever roster was built on one promise: defensive identity. Stephanie White came in promising a new culture, a harder-nosed team, a group that would make opponents earn every single possession. Defensive-minded players were prioritized in roster construction. The whole organizational messaging pointed toward becoming a team that won with toughness and grit on that end of the floor. The Wings scored over 100 points. Let that sink in. Against a coach who built her entire reputation around defense, against a roster specifically constructed with defense in mind, a team that won 10 games last season walked into Indianapolis and topped 100. The open shots weren't difficult reads. The open shots were right there. Wide open looks generated by an offense that moved the ball confidently against a defense that had no answers. Foul trouble compounded everything. Early in the game, Dallas was getting to the free throw line repeatedly because Indiana's defenders were a step slow, reaching, gambling, and losing. This wasn't a case of the other team getting hot. This was a systemic defensive failure in a game where the entire identity of the franchise was supposed to be tested, and it collapsed almost immediately. Now let's talk about the offense. Specifically, let's talk about Caitlin Clark. For most of this game, Clark looked like someone playing in a foreign system, uncomfortable, unable to find rhythm, isolated. Compare that to what we watched at Iowa. At Iowa, the offense was engineered around her. Screens were set. Spacing was created. Her teammates understood their assignments, and those assignments were specifically designed to manufacture open looks and driving lanes for the best player on the floor. In Indiana on opening night, she was playing off ball for significant stretches. She was getting physically hacked with no screens being set to free her. And when she did have the ball, she was working against a defensive scheme that had clearly prepared for exactly that, knowing that nobody on the floor was going to create problems in other areas. When your star player is getting hammered all night and the offensive system isn't taking that into account, that's not a player problem. That's a coaching problem. That's a design problem. Aliyah Boston, a player who looked dominant and unstoppable in college, is looking slow and heavy-footed in an Indiana uniform. 4 rebounds in a game where she should be controlling the glass. There's a version of Aliyah Boston who is a force in this league. What we saw in the opener was not that version, and the question fans are rightfully asking is whether the system is helping or hurting her development. Raven Johnson, meanwhile, is not getting minutes that match what fans believe she's capable of. Her absence from meaningful rotations is one of the more confusing coaching decisions from the opener. A young, energetic player sitting while the game slips away. Here's one thing that didn't get enough attention in the immediate aftermath of the loss. The second unit is not good. And not just could use some work, not good. We're talking about a bench that is catastrophically outmatched when placed against the reserves of any legitimate contender. Think about it this way. The New York Liberty, a team built to compete for championships, has a second unit that would probably beat Indiana's starting lineup in a scrimmage. Their reserves have length, versatility, and professional polish. The Fever's bench, by contrast, is overloaded with guards who lack the size and positional flexibility this league demands, and is missing the big, multi-dimensional players who can protect the rim, switch defensively, and create mismatches on offense. When a game gets away from you, when you need reserves to hold a lead or to cut into a deficit, the bench has to be able to function. If your second unit can't maintain competitiveness, the pressure on your starters becomes unsustainable. Every starter has to play bigger minutes, fatigue becomes a factor, and late game execution suffers because the people on the floor have been carrying too much all night. Roster construction is a cold, mathematical exercise, and the math here doesn't work. Let's talk about the coaching staff because this is where things get uncomfortable. There's a clip circulating from the final minute of the game. The Fever are in a timeout huddle. The situation is critical, and Stephanie White turns to her assistants and asks out loud, "What do you think they're going to run here?" That moment is being dissected everywhere, and honestly, the dissection is fair. In the final moments of a game, the head coach is supposed to be the one with answers. She should know the opponent's tendencies cold. She should have already anticipated the likely play calls based on what she saw across 39 minutes of basketball. Her staff should be reinforcing her reads, not generating them. A head coach asking her assistants what the opponent is going to do in a critical moment isn't collaboration. It's uncertainty made visible at the worst possible time. Now, some will say this is unfair. Coaches talk to their staffs. That's normal. Every staff communicates in timeouts, but there's a difference between checking in and checking out. And the way this clip landed, the visual of the headset coming off, the body language, the question itself, doesn't project the confidence of a head coach who has her team prepared and her game plan locked in. Stephanie White left Vanderbilt under difficult circumstances. The program struggled. She came to Indiana promising a new direction, a defensive revolution, a culture overhaul. And in the most important game of her tenure so far, the game with the biggest stage, the most eyes, and the highest stakes, the performance on both ends of the floor raised more questions than it answered. That doesn't mean she should be fired after game one. One game is not a career, but it does mean the bar for the next few weeks just got raised significantly. Patterns establish themselves early. If the defensive breakdowns continue, if the offensive stagnation around Clark persists, if the bench continues to be outmatched, then that one clip is going to look more and more like a window into something systemic rather than an isolated moment. On top of everything else, there's the Caitlin Clark injury situation, and it's already creating confusion. Initial reports called it a back injury. Then the broadcast started mentioning it might be a hip flexor. Then the groin entered the conversation. The messaging was inconsistent, contradictory, and came at a time when fans were already watching Clark struggle to find her footing in the game. The word precautionary was used. And look, precautionary is fine. Protecting your franchise player is always the right call. But given the context of how she was used during the game off ball, unsupported by screens, getting physically abused by defenders, fans aren't just worried about the injury. They're worried about the pattern. They're asking whether this team has a plan to protect her, not just medically but structurally. Will she be screened properly? Will the officiating be addressed? Will the coaching staff build something around her that actually makes sense? Because right now, the answers to all of those questions are unclear. And unclear isn't good enough for a player of her profile in a league trying to capitalize on its biggest moment. Here's what nobody in Fever media wants to acknowledge. The fan base is already splitting. You've got traditional Fever fans who feel like the Clark fans are overreacting to one game. You've got Clark fans who feel like anyone defending the front office or coaching staff is engaged in willful blindness. You've got content creators pushing the stay calm. It's early narrative while their comment sections are openly in revolt. And underneath all of it, you've got fans who have simply walked away. One comment that went wide in the aftermath of the loss said it plainly. "I'm a Washington Mystics fan now." That's not an empty threat from a troll account. That's a paying customer, a ticket buyer, a viewer, someone who invested real money and emotional energy into this franchise, announcing they're done. Another predicted Caitlin Clark would either quit on the team or the roster would lose every game. Whether or not those outcomes are realistic, the sentiment behind them is real. And sentiment drives engagement, attendance, and the commercial apparatus that keeps this league alive. The energy in the building during the loss told the whole story. A crowd that came in ready to celebrate went home deflated. The arena didn't erupt. The highlights didn't trend the right way. The narrative that should have been WNBA's biggest opener delivers historic result became Fever lose to a team that won 10 games last year. That's an opportunity squandered not just for Indiana, but for the whole league. The WNBA just had its most watched season opener in history. The league is riding momentum that nobody could have predicted 5 years ago. There are new teams, new media deals, new audiences, and a cultural moment that every franchise needs to capitalize on while the window is open. The Indiana Fever are the central draw in all of it. Caitlin Clark is the most commercially significant player the league has ever had. The roster around her represents a massive organizational investment. And opening night, the single most watched game of the early season, delivered a loss to a 10-win team, defensive chaos, offensive confusion, a questionable coaching moment on the biggest stage, and a social media meltdown that is still reverberating. The fans who grew up watching the NBA in the 80s and 90s, the ones the Fever media is calling casual or uninformed, know exactly what they're looking at. They've watched championship-level basketball. They understand what a well-designed offense looks like, what defensive rotations are supposed to accomplish, and what player development looks like when a staff actually knows what it's doing. When those fans look at this Fever team and say something isn't right, they're not reacting emotionally. They're pattern matching against decades of basketball knowledge, and the pattern isn't encouraging. So what happens next? That's the real question. Does the front office treat this as a one-game anomaly and trust the process? Or do they recognize that the pressure of this season doesn't allow for a slow learning curve? The only automatic wins people are identifying for this roster are against the sun and the sky. 2 teams. The rest of the league, including Toronto, which is brand new, represents a real challenge given the current roster configuration. When realistic win projections start shrinking before the season is a week old, you have a fundamental organizational problem that goes beyond one bad coaching decision or one off night from a star player. The Fever don't have time to figure this out gradually. They are the league's marquee franchise right now, whether they asked for that or not. Every game they play is going to be watched. Every loss is going to be analyzed. Every coaching decision is going to be scrutinized. The fan base has made it clear that patience is not the operating currency right now, accountability is. Simply explaining, the Indiana Fever had the biggest stage in WNBA opening history, and they didn't just lose, they raised every red flag that was waved during the offseason. The bench is outmatched. The defense failed its first real test. The offensive system isn't maximizing its best player. The coaching staff showed visible uncertainty at the worst moment. And the fans who predicted all of this are not in the mood to be told they don't understand basketball. The Fever need answers. They need them fast. And the clock is already running. If you're a Fever fan watching this unfold, drop a comment. Are you still holding out hope, or did that Dallas loss confirm what you already knew was coming? Let me know below, and if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, because on this channel we don't chase the cover story. We find the real one.